Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Ripe here again, bringing you another unbelievable neighbor story. Imagine leaving your home for a while, only to come back and find out that your neighbor has taken over, renovating your backyard, making decisions about your property, and acting like they own the place. Sounds insane, right? Well, that's exactly what happened in today's story, and trust me, you won't believe how it all plays out. Let's jump right in. Our HOA is run by what I can only describe as a group of power-tripping individuals. The president, let's call him Duke, lives 3 houses down from me. Another board member, who I will call Chip, lives right across from me. These two are basically the neighborhood's self-appointed watchdogs, but they don't exactly practice what they preach. It started with the driveway situation. My wife and I got a notice about rust-colored stains on our concrete driveway. The fine was $150, which seemed excessive for what amounted to a few small marks from our daughter's bike chain. Meanwhile, Chip's son had been working on his lifted truck for months, leaving a massive oil stain covered by this ratty red towel that just sat there collecting dirt. When I brought this up at the next HOA meeting, Duke just brushed it off. Well, Duke said, adjusting his golf polo, the board has determined that temporary automotive work is permitted within reasonable timeframes. 8 months is temporary, I asked. The situation is being monitored, was all he said, but the real drama started with the speed bumps. We had normal ones before, they kind of make you slow down but don't destroy your suspension. Then one night, Duke's wife, Marlene, yeah, that's what she actually goes by, crashed her Mercedes into a tree after what everyone knew was a pretty wild book club meeting. Instead of addressing the actual problem, which is drunk driving, the HOA decided that speeding was the neighborhood's biggest issue. At the next meeting, Duke stood up and declared, "We've received numerous complaints about excessive speeding in our community. The board has unanimously decided to implement enhanced traffic calming measures." And well, enhanced was an understatement. They installed what I can only describe as miniature mountains across our main road. These were not just speed bumps, they were car killers. You literally had to come to a complete stop, ease up on one side, stop again, then slowly descend the other side, then repeat the whole process for your back wheels. It was turning a 2-minute drive to the entrance into a 10-minute obstacle course. My neighbor Trey, a cool guy who drives a Civic, came over one evening after his oil pan got scraped. "Man, this is ridiculous," he said, showing me the damage. "I've lived here for 6 years, and we've never had a speeding problem. The only accident was when Marlene hit the tree," I finished. We both knew it, but nobody dared to say it at the meetings. People started driving on the grass to avoid these monstrosities. So what did our brilliant HOA board do? They installed concrete barriers. Emergency vehicles could barely get through. Our local fire department even sent a letter of concern, which the board promptly ignored. That is when I decided enough was enough. I'm not proud of what I did, but after watching an elderly resident struggle to get her car over these things and hearing horror stories about damaged vehicles, I took action. I may or may not have acquired some diesel fuel and applied it to these barriers of tyranny the night before garbage day. Those massive trucks did exactly what you would expect, compromised asphalt. The HOA was furious. They rebuilt them even higher, if you can believe it. So I might have repeated my midnight maintenance. After the second time, they finally gave up and installed normal regulation height speed bumps that actually made sense. Here is where I might be the a-hole. I never admitted to anything, but word got around. Most neighbors were thankful. I've never gotten so many random invites to backyard barbecues. But Duke and Chip are on a warpath. They've been trying to prove it was me, sending threatening letters about vandalism and property destruction, and they even hired a private investigator. Pretty sure it's just Chip's brother-in-law with a camera to watch my house. My wife thinks I went too far and should have handled it through proper channels. Well, we tried that, multiple complaints, petition signatures, even that letter from the fire department, but nothing worked until someone took direct action. So Reddit, am I the a-hole for taking matters into my own hands? And yeah, guys, let me know what you think about this in the comments. Do you think OP did the right thing here for the neighborhood, or was he just a criminal? A user on Reddit said, "You are the a-hole. I don't care how annoying those speed bumps were, you committed vandalism of community property. What you did was literally a crime. People like you are why HOA fees keep going up. You could have pursued legal channels or moved out if you didn't like the rules. Comment number 2. You are the a-hole. Speed bumps exist for a reason. I have kids who play in this neighborhood, not this one specifically, but you get my point, and I would rather have damaged cars than injured children. You took it upon yourself to destroy safety equipment because it inconvenienced you. That's selfish and dangerous. Comment number 3. Everyone sucks here. The HOA board clearly overstepped with those ridiculous speed bumps, but destroying property is not the answer. You should have documented everything and reported them to the city-county for court violations. Now you have given them ammunition to use against residents who oppose them. And yeah guys, if you have watched until here, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you so much. The next one is titled Neighbor Sold My House While I Was Away and Built a Pool in My Backyard. To provide you all with some context on the situation, I work as a manager for a company in Eastern Africa, but my home is in Namibia. Due to my extreme work schedule, my boss usually allows me an extended vacation once a year for me to go home during the slow season. I don't have a wife or kids, but the pay is extremely good. I've never had an issue with the way things have been going. It allowed me to purchase my dream home and pay it off extremely quickly. A few years ago, my neighbors sold their house. It came as a shock as I really liked them. We would have dinner some nights whenever I came home. They even house sat for me whenever I was away, doing things like parking their car in my driveway to make it seem like someone was actually home and keeping the lights on. Well, this all changed when my new neighbor, let's call her Cassandra, a 45-year-old female, bought their house and moved in along with her husband and 3 kids. At first they seemed perfectly normal. Our community is really tight-knit, we all know one another. Let's just say that Cassandra began to make a reputation for herself very quickly. She began first with anonymous noise complaints, filing them on people in the neighborhood if they dared to make too much noise. People were saying you could look over at her house and see her peeking through the windows, sneering as she watched the police tell our neighbors to quiet down, or calling tow trucks on vehicles of neighbors that she thought were eyesores. Then things started to get personal. Even when others in the neighborhood tried to confront her about her actions, she would adamantly say that she had nothing to do with it while flashing a fake smile. Or when she was invited to the very same parties, she would again sit in the windows and wait for any excuse to have the police come to break it up. One time when I returned home from work, I pulled up to realize a tree on the corner of my lot had been cut down. Shocked and confused, I headed to Cassandra's house to ask if she knew what had happened. She answered the door with a smug face and said, "Yes, can I help you?" "I'm really sorry to bother you, Cassandra." I then gestured over to the stump that now sat on the corner of my lot. "Do you have any idea what happened to my tree?" She scoffed at me and said, "I will have you know that I had a surveyor come out to check the property lines, and I was appalled to find that your tree branches were crossing over the line onto my lot, so I had it cut down. I'm sure you understand that is against the rules." She then promptly slammed the door in my face, leaving me dumbfounded on the doorstep. Another thing you should know about me before I continue is that I'm fastidious about my documents. I keep everything, and I mean everything, secure in my home within a safe. Also, for added security, I keep a digital copy securely on a remote server. Call me paranoid, but it worked in my favor. I double-checked the property lines, and yes, she was right. I did have branches hanging over, but that was an incredible step to cut down my entire tree for that. I decided at this point to keep the peace, deciding to leave the tree thing behind. After all, I'm not home for most of the year, and if it truly bothers her, then who am I to care about a tree? This was a mistake that only emboldened Cassandra. If she could get away with calling the police on her neighbors, having trees and other things removed that she deemed undesirable with no consequences, who knows how far she could really push it? Well, and push it she did. The true peak of her behavior was last year. It was the same time of year as all the others. The slow season where my boss gave me the go-ahead to come home for my usual leave time. I was tired and looking forward to sleeping in for a few months, until I was pulling up to my house. For a moment, I was worried that I had pulled down the wrong street. I had just gotten off of a red-eye flight, so I was exhausted to say the least. But no, the house number was right, but the color was off. My house was now a hideous orange color, and an SUV was already parked in my driveway. There were kids' toys strewn across the lawn, and peeking into my backyard, there was now a sprawling swimming pool that definitely was not there before I last left. I parked on the street and slowly walked up the path to the door and knocked. A few moments later, a young man, maybe 25, answered the door. I stood there like an idiot, not able to even form a sentence without it sounding crazy, so I went for it. "What are you doing in my house?" I asked, and he looked around confused. "I'm not sure what you're talking about. We just bought this place not even a month ago." "That is impossible. This is my house," I retorted. I pulled out my phone and showed him a handful of photos I had taken around the place of the beautiful sunsets. You can catch off the back porch to some group photos me and some of the neighbors had taken a few years back. "I'm sorry, man. I don't know what to say. Come on in. I can show you the paperwork." He stepped back from the door and allowed me to walk past him. While he is a very nice gentleman, his taste and style is not my type. Strange color choices and furniture locations make the house seem alien to me, not the usual comfortable refuge I'm used to coming back to. A few moments later, he returned from the office, well, what used to be my office but is now his daughter's bedroom. He hesitated for a moment, keeping the papers tucked against his chest, no doubt picking up on the dread in my eyes. He relents, handing me a small bundle of papers. I'm immediately dumbfounded. I flip rapidly through the pages, scanning the paragraphs that lead to my house, and there at the bottom of the contract is my signature. I feel sick, my ears begin to ring as the realization washes over me. I feel goosebumps pepper my skin. My house has been swept out from underneath me. I can see the man's lips moving, but I cannot hear a word coming from his mouth. I stood up and stumbled my way to the door, dazed and confused. I clipped my hip off a table that didn't used to be there. I made it to my car, and I see the young man in the doorway, a puzzled look on his face, but that's not what I focused on. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a face, Cassandra's face to be exact, peeking through the blinds of her house. We lock eyes and she quickly yanks herself away from the window, no doubt hoping that I didn't see. I barely remembered what happened next. I remember my hands fumbling for my keys, driving hastily, my mind a soup. I drove to a nearby hotel and rented a room. I sat on that bed for what felt like hours, staring at the wall, hearing the droning noise of the clock ticking on the wall. This guy had my signature on those documents, but how? It was all legit. I called my lawyer, got my laptop out. This was not going to stand. Cassandra had gone too far and messed with the wrong man. Our first attempts at contacting the local police were a bust. The paperwork was legitimate, they said. Nothing could be done, and we shouldn't be wasting their time. So then my lawyer and I dug deeper and began to uncover a paper trail. We found the signature that Cassandra had used was lifted from a petition I had signed last year. How she got a hold of it, I'm not sure. Then we found trails of others complaining all across Namibia of the same thing happening in similar high-end homes. All of them talked about how a woman moved in next door or in the neighborhood that matched her description, but going by different names, then targeting them over petty disputes. Then when they left for a vacation or a work trip, their house was sold when they got home, now basically inhabited by complete strangers. It looked like she was able to pull this off as she had an accomplice in the industry. As with each of these sales, they all had the same real estate agent, an older man, who after some more digging turned out to be Cassandra's father-in-law. She had found a perfect partner in crime who was able to get clients, acquire sensitive legal documentation, and bribe the right people. With this newfound evidence and a copy of my actual legal documents from my secure server, we finally got the police's attention. I will never forget the day of pulling up to Cassandra's house and watching from across the street as two police cars came pulling in front of her home. She answered the door, irritated at the officers for interrupting her. Her tone changed real quick once the officers told her that they were there to arrest her. Watching her as she bawled her eyes out as she was dragged towards the police car, At first she was apologizing profusely and throwing her real estate agent under the bus, saying that they were the masterminds of the whole scheme. Once she realized playing that act was not working anymore, she changed gears into her true self. She began to kick and scream, hurling insults at the officers as she was stuffed into the back seat of the car. I made sure to be standing on the sidewalk, waving with a smile as she drove by. She pressed her face against the glass and screamed at me as a child would when having a meltdown. As for the aftermath of this entire situation, the families that were Cassandra's victims are obviously distraught. The young man I had mentioned before apologized profusely to me. I told him he had nothing to be sorry for. To this day I have a good relationship with him. As the court case progressed against Cassandra and her accomplice, all the victims whose houses were stolen and those who were unknowingly scammed all received hefty payouts from insurance companies, as well as having all of Cassandra's assets liquidated and split up to all the affected people involved, including myself. Cassandra and the agent received multiple years in prison for their actions, including but not limited to fabrication of legal documents, fraud, and even theft. As for me, I actually have to thank Cassandra for one thing, and that is the pool. Ironically enough, I find myself most nights going for a swim. It's even become another space for the neighborhood to meet up. Also, with the money I got from the courts, I was able to quit my job. Cassandra made me realize it's time to settle down and finally put my roots in somewhere. Now, let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. I'm the boss of a restaurant in a little city, or a large town, depending on how you're looking at it. People here like my restaurant chain, which I started when I came here 20 years ago after I got my bachelor's in culinary arts. It's been doing pretty good, all thanks to my wife. She got her business degree and helps keep things running smoothly. We are sweethearts from college and have been together for a long while, 2 decades to be exact. Even though we have a bunch of restaurants now, we still have time to drop by each one every month. We do that to make sure the food is still up to standards and to hear from our staff. We want to know what is what and if anything is important. Since it is a small city, connections are important and must be updated with what is happening around them. About 3 months ago, we opened up a new branch. This one was in a part of the city where fancy restaurants were not many, maybe 2 in total. People said our business might not do so great there, but we had a different plan. Making lots of money was not the main goal for this branch. We wanted more folks to know about us, even though these folks might not live in the busy center of the city. I aimed to turn our restaurant chain into a well-known name and a family favorite in the city so we could cut corners, literally. So when we showed up on the very first day of opening, things were going pretty smooth. The place was not completely full, but it was close, and everyone seemed to like the fancy setup. But well, on the 3rd day we ran into a problem. A Karen, yeah, one of those folks who always wants to talk to the boss because her breadsticks were not oily enough and her salad was too oily. We actually found out about the whole thing after it was done, but I will tell it in order so it makes sense. This Karen showed up a few hours before we closed, and the only thing she wanted and asked for was a bottle of wine. But even after her drink was given to her, this Karen kept bothering our male waiters. She would call them over every 10 or so minutes, ask them about the menu and what they like to eat, but never actually order anything. Then things took a disgusting turn when she put her hand on one of our waiters' thighs. Luckily, our waitress stepped in quickly. She pulled the waiter away and told the Karen that she had to order some food because her wine was all gone and she couldn't just hang out here any longer. The Karen let out a huff and started talking in a rude way. After about 5 minutes of complaining about jealous singles and desperate women, she asked for free appetizers. Our waitress told her that free starters were only for the opening day and now she would need to pay. But the Karen was not having it. She started going on about how she is a pal of the owner and he promised her free food at his new place. Our waitress wasn't buying it though and politely said that she could not give out freebies like that. Karen, you're kidding me, right? I know the owner. He said I could have anything I want. He literally invited me here. Waitress, I'm really sorry, but I can't give you free food. You will have to order and pay. Karen, this is ridiculous. Get your manager here now. Waitress, I'm here to help, but I cannot give you free food, and I assure you the owner does not promise free meals like that. Unless and until the owner comes to sit here with you, we cannot take your word for it. Karen, how dare you? I will have you fired for this. The waitress kept her cool, trying her best to be calm and polite, while Karen got more and more aggressive. It was like Karen was on a mission to get her way no matter what. At that very moment, my wife and I walked into the restaurant and were confronted with this whole messy situation. The waitress and Karen were so into their argument that they had not even noticed us entering. Our waitress was trying hard to reason with Karen, but Karen was just not having any of it. My wife and I started heading towards their table, trying to figure out what was happening, but then out of the blue, Karen stood up so suddenly that her chair toppled back, and then she had the audacity to slap our waitress. It all happened so fast. Without thinking, I dashed forward and pulled the waitress away from the escalating chaos, but this time Karen's swing hit me instead of the waitress. Karen was still shouting, going on about how our staff was rude and aggressive, and how they would not serve her, and how they were calling her a liar without any reason. As I was trying to calm things down, Karen pointed her finger at me and kept yelling. She threatened that she would talk to the owner, not realizing it was actually me, and get everyone fired for ruining her supposed great night. At this point, I'd had enough of Karen's nonsense. I cut her off before she could spew more of her ridiculous claims. I looked at her straight in the eyes and said, I am the owner of this restaurant, yes, the same one you claim to be buddies with, and I can assure you that I don't keep friendships with people like you who behave so poorly towards my staff or any staff in general. Karen just scoffed and rolled her eyes. She was not buying it, not even a bit. Oh please, like I'm supposed to believe that, she retorted with a snarky tone. I stayed calm and replied, believe what you want, but your actions are causing a disturbance. I've asked my manager to call the police, and they will be here soon. This seemed to set Karen off even more. She started shouting at me, claiming that I was trying to frame her and ruin her night. She got right up in my face, fake tears streaming down her cheeks, and started accusing the male of harassing her and trying to take advantage of her innocence. I knew I had to maintain my distance, but Karen's actions were becoming more aggressive. She actually started touching me again, trying to force me to touch her as well. That was the last straw. I suddenly signaled to my wife, who was watching the situation unfold, to step in. The police were not going to arrive in time, so it was up to us to de-escalate the situation. It was becoming clearer that Karen was out of control, and we needed to handle this before things got even more out of hand. Little did Karen know my wife was actually a kickboxing expert. As Karen once again tried to touch me inappropriately, she did not have time to even blink before my wife's swift and skilled move knocked her out. Don't worry, my wife was extremely talented, and Karen was not going to have more brain damage than she already had. She was only going to be out for a few minutes, which was just enough time for the police to arrive. As if on cue, the police showed up just as Karen was beginning to regain consciousness. My waitress and manager quickly briefed the officers on all the events that had unfolded. I encouraged my waitress to press charges, and she agreed. I shared my side of the story with the police officers as well. Karen, in her dazed state, started to understand the situation, but she was not about to go down without a fight. She began to paint me and my staff as the villains, claiming that she was being assaulted by us. She tried to play the victim card, but luckily we had CCTV footage that captured the whole scene. After about 30 minutes of back and forth with the police, they made their decision, and they basically shoved Karen in their car. I pressed charges against her as well, along with a waiter who was harassed by the Karen. After a brief investigation, Karen ended up behind bars for a good few months, facing the consequences of her own actions. The next one is a funny story from Arsh Petty Revenge that we will read before we end the video. It is titled Messy Coworker Who Never Cleaned Up Their Mess. So I was an office manager for a small family-owned business at the time this happened. We only had about 10 people working out of our offices, and some of those people were only in the offices for a few hours a week. We had 5 people in the office full-time, and we have a small break room with a refrigerator and a microwave. Everyone kept drinks in the refrigerator, and a few people brought lunches occasionally, but only one person brought their lunch every day. We will call this person Jay. Now, not only would Jay bring lunch daily, she would keep all kinds of food in her office and in the refrigerator. The problem was oftentimes that Jay would leave food in the refrigerator for weeks at a time, and it would go bad and start smelling and just taking up room needlessly. Now, Jay was also the primary user of the microwave, but she would never cover her food, and the microwave was always dirty, which was why no one else used it. So I had to set a new rule that mostly only affected Jay. The refrigerator had to be cleaned out every Friday, and you had to take your stuff home or toss it. Also, Jay was instructed to clean the microwave every day. I was always the last to leave on Friday, so I started tossing Jay's food on Friday after she left. This got her attention quickly, and she would take her stuff home from the refrigerator, but she still was not cleaning the microwave. So once in a great while, I went to use the microwave, and it was disgusting and gross, and Jay was gone for the weekend. So then I ended up cleaning the microwave, just so I could pop some popcorn. After I popped my popcorn, I climbed up and unplugged the microwave, and put an out-of-service sign on it. The next week Jay came in and was shocked when the microwave was not working. I told her that I tried to make popcorn, and it stopped working. She asked when it would be fixed, and I told her it was pretty low priority, so I didn't know. The microwave was left unplugged for over 8 months, and the only person who ever asked about it was Jay. Finally, she mentioned it to the owner, and he came to talk to me. I explained the situation, and he just had a good laugh. Jay was later let go because of other reasons. After she was let go though, I plugged the microwave back in, and the microwave was always clean without Jay using it. And there you have it, some of the craziest neighborhood drama I've ever come across. From entitled neighbors stealing homes to HOAs running wild, it's clear that some people just don't know when to stop. But in the end, justice always finds a way. What do you guys think? How would you have handled these situations? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more unbelievable stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.